You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. My name is Paul. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. Thank you so much. But Joe, go ahead. Put the meme back up there. Yeah. If we're broadcasting on our terrestrial radio stations across Arkansas, but we're also broadcasting over at paulharrell.com, where you can watch the show and you can get this one meme up here. We had it yesterday, Joe Jet. Yeah, because we've got Josh Waters on the phone. That's why I want it up there. So Josh Waters is with us. Josh Waters is from Political Strategies, and you know what? I'm going to go ahead and call this. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do this because he's a young guy and he's been on the Conservative Future segment before, and so I figure we'll just have another Conservative Future segment right now. Josh, welcome back to the program, sir.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you could join us. We're kind of going to get your impression of the session, though. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here because, well, I mean, this was kind of your first go-around, right? This was kind of your first round to see what it was like down at the Marble Palace, right?
Yeah, that's true. I kind of followed a little bit, I guess, in previous sessions just here and there, but this was kind of the first session on a day-to-day basis, kind of keeping track of everything that was going on. So it was definitely a learning experience. So,
I mean, feel free, Josh. I mean, what's your impression of the session 2017? As an attorney, you work for Political Strategies down there. Your client was Conduit for Action. Feel free to take as long or as little time as you want. What's your impression of the session down there?
Well, if you would have asked me that with about 2 to 3 weeks to go in the session, I think it would have been a much different answer because the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's, the internet sales tax and the gas tax hike were defeated. And so going into those last few weeks, if those would have passed, this would have ended up being a session of over $300 million of tax increases. So I think that was scaled back a lot. But overall, I guess my impression was with a House of 76 Republicans, the Senate with 26 out of 35 Republicans. A lot of people throughout Arkansas, if not the vast majority, are going to see a net increase in fees and taxes that they pay after this session. And so I think that's a disappointment for many. I think there's a few good things that came out of the session, but overall I think there's a lot of defense played. I think there's a few conservatives voting blocks that kind of joined together to defeat some of these bad taxes. So overall, I don't know if it was an F, but I wouldn't necessarily give it A or a B. I think it was kind of mixed. So.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my impression.
Yeah, when the high point of it, from what I can hear from you, when the high point of it is defeating massive tax increases, that even now after the session's over, Governor Asa Hutchinson says, hey, this isn't over. We're going to still address this. There's still, people that want a gas tax increase. There's people that want to try to get the unconstitutional internet sales tax passed. I mean, if those are our high points with 76 supposed conservatives and a massive majority in the Senate as well, there's something not right. I mean, I was talking to a Republican today here at up in my neck of the woods. And I'm not gonna give her name, but I mean, it was everybody is scratching their head, wondering how we got here, and I'm the same way. What did you think about the number, the sheer volume of legislation, Josh? We're talking with Josh Waters from Political Strategies. What did you think about that? How was it difficult to keep up with everything?
Yeah, that was another learning experience, I guess you could say, was, I don't know the exact number. I think it was over 2,000 bills that were filed. And, not all of those maybe ran in committees, or definitely not all of them got to the House floor. But I think it just shows a lot of these legislators, they're kind of put in a tough spot. They really don't have the time to read all these bills. They kind of have to rely on what the person down at the end of the table in a committee meeting or the person presenting on the floor. They really just have to rely on them to, give them the full picture on a bill. And so when you have that many bills, inevitably there's some things slipped through. But, Conduit for Action, our client, has a limited scope, just bills affecting economic freedom and the economic freedom filter. And so, even that limited scope, it was hard to keep track sometimes. So these legislators have to keep track of all the bills. I don't envy them. But thankfully, there's groups like Conduit and AFP and some other groups that try to inform the voters so that they can then contact their legislators.
Yeah.
So that was a learning experience as well. I heard, I don't know if complaining was the word, but I heard at least on one occasion where, legislators talking about having on, these emails generated or getting all these emails from your constituents about specifically the internet sales tax and how they didn't want them to vote for it, it sounded like. And to me, I think that's a good thing. I think, having more people involved and getting more feedback from your constituents is good. Sometimes these bills fly so fast, people back at home can't keep track. So that was one. I think people were able to keep track of.
Sometimes it's like, if they really want to vote for something and they get emails telling them not to vote for it, then they're like, we're getting these emails and, ignore them. But if they really, really want to vote for something, they'll immediately turn around and use the emails as justification if the emails are telling them to vote for it. It's just so subjective, and they get really upset when the establishment has made a decision and there's actually people back home that are, trying to push back against it. They don't like that one bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I just hope people will pay more attention, hopefully, going forward. I think, there's more people paying attention this session with some of the bigger bills. And so hopefully more people will get involved and then, keep their legislators honest, too, going forward.
Yeah.
So
I hope so, too. I've got a quick audio clip I want to play for you real quick.
So you mentioned the word roll call one more time, and I'm shutting you down.
Okay, so can you just kind of recount that for us? I mean, that's a big deal where you and you might have single-handedly you're asking for that roll call vote. There was a roll call vote called that day, and it came out. The voice vote came out almost just like you said, and you were worried that it was going to, and yet, it ended up failing on the actual roll call and passed on the voice vote. And so, but kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, honestly, I was really caught off guard. It was nothing. My comments were nothing against Representative Jett. I've just seen, throughout the session, in a lot of these committee meetings, there'll be, a vote call. And there might be 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, I can't really tell how many yes votes there are. And there might be a few less no votes. But technically, when a roll call is called, then it has to get 11 votes.
So you mentioned the word roll call one more time, and I'm shutting you down.
Yeah, you got to quit saying the roll call. You're saying roll call too much. Anyway, I'm sorry. Keep going, Josh. I love you. Keep going.
So that was my point is. It wasn't against him. It's just the process. I couldn't have sat up there and tried to make sure there's 11 votes, and maybe that's not. Maybe they just need to hear that there's more yes than no's. But I think at the end of the day, specifically on that bill, I think there's some other bills that there's no controversy on, but that bill, very controversial bill, and with the $150 million price tag, I think deserves a roll call vote. And so that's what I was trying to get across there, just the importance of the bill and just making sure it got the 11 votes.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nothing against. And I talked with Representative Jett, and he's been gracious to let me speak in that committee, and I appreciate that. And I talked to him afterwards. It was nothing against him. It was just that specific bill. So.
Yeah, and if anything, you were criticizing. I mean, I don't want to. I feel like, Josh, it was a criticism of the if there is any criticism there, it's a criticism of the process, not him. not his integrity, but the fact that it is strange that it takes 11 yes votes to get something out of committee. But if only 6 people vote yes on the voice vote and 2 people vote no, then, he can just say it's passed. And I find that very contradictory.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's nothing against Representative Jett or whoever the chairman would have been. And usually I don't even think about stuff like that. I'm try to stick more to the policy, but on something that important, especially in that committee, they've had roll calls in the past on that bill, so I knew it was probably going to be a close vote, and ultimately the roll call is what kept it from passing that day. But like I said, it's just one of those things. A bill that important, there's some other bills, really important bills from other committees that got roll calls, and they passed with 11 or 12. It was close.
Were you surprised that the Democrats on that committee, they held out and held out and held out? They wanted their amendment. When their amendment finally failed for the last time, they went ahead and caved and voted for. I mean, were you surprised that they? I mean, it's almost like the Republicans knew that if they just don't, that the Democrats will eventually cave.
Well, to be honest with you, I kind of had a lot of respect for the Democrats in that committee going into the session. That was, their strategy was to kind of pack that committee with as many as they could, and then that was kind of where they had the power, and they used it, all the way up until the end. They tried to get on their what they wanted funded and what their goals were to have funded. So, they stuck to coming to the session. They said, this is what we want to fund. This is our priority. This is how we might achieve it on this committee. And they stuck through it to the end. So, Representative Michael John Gray and Representative Vivian Flowers, they held out until the end to try to get that amendment on there. And, ultimately they weren't successful with that. But
let me ask you this. You think there's a, in politics, we just got off of a political season where we talked about the swamp in Washington, D.C. I mean, is it a similar environment, in your opinion, after being down there a session in Little Rock?
Well, one thing I did notice, I didn't, know going in, was in all these committee rooms, it's filled with probably 95% of the people there are, somehow related to government or from a government entity or department or commission, or the clients, the city or county from another part of the state. And so that was kind of eye-opening, is that so much that goes on there seems to be very focused on how bills impact other government entities or agencies, commissions. And so, that was kind of eye-opening. But then there were some good comments from, Representative Lundstrom had a good comment about the taxpayer as our customer. Representative Andy Davis, talked about, we hear a lot about government entities and how bills affect them, but we don't talk maybe enough about how this affects the taxpayer. So I think there's a little pushback, but overall that was a little concerning. That
so you're saying it was amazing to you, or it was concerning to you, that a lot of the lobbyists are actually lobbying for government agencies.
Well, I don't know who's paying. You can't tell what everyone's there for, but you kind of see the same people, and then they'll get down and talk about what agency or office they're from. And so I think a lot of the time they're more there for informational purposes, but then there were several times where, they opposed or supported something based on the impact it would have to their.
I mean, you had somebody. I mean, committee like day 1 or 2. I was down there in the Public Health Committee in the Senate. They had a guy there from the. It wasn't Surgeon General Bledsoe, but it was somebody else in a health department capacity, and he was telling the committee what this government department is, what's on their agenda this session, what they hope to get accomplished. And I'm like, why does a government bureaucracy have an agenda? why, the legislature will set your agenda for you, or the executive will set your agenda, and so I agree with you. It is, people would be shocked to know how much of the session revolves around bureaucrats trying to, influence the way things go. So, anyway, Josh Waters, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
You have made the word roll call famous in a way that I never could, and so I thank you for that.
Well, it is important, especially on bills. $150 million price tag. That's a big price tag for the taxpayers. So.
All right, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks, Josh. We'll talk to you soon. Be safe.
Thanks.
Folks, that's the end of the